Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
How many people can say they've never worked for anyone else? Selling eggs door to door at 14 years old began a lifetime of self-employment. As a speaker and small business consultant, today's guest, Jeffrey Shaw, helps self-employed and small business owners gain control of their business in what seems like otherwise uncontrollable circumstances. Drawing on his experience as a renowned portrait photographer, Jeffrey shows business owners how to see business through a different lens and strategies to compose the often chaotic pieces of life and business into sustainable success. Jeffrey's TEDx Lincoln Square talk is featured on TED.com, and he's the host of the top-rated podcast, The Self-Employed Life. He's also the author of The Self-Employed Life, Business and Personal Development Strategies that Create Sustainable Success, and Lingo, Discover Your Ideal Customer's Secret Language and Make Your Business Irresistible. Please join me in welcoming Jeffrey Shaw. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Tammy. Always fun to hang out with you. Sorry for the very long subtitles of my books. It's a mouthful.
You know what? It captures the value of what you have to offer in those books. So I have no problem with it whatsoever. So, Jeffrey, as you know, on Work from the Inside Out, we love to begin at the beginning. Now, we already started telling a little bit of the beginning story about you selling eggs door to door. I can imagine if you were selling eggs door to door today in 2023, you would have made a bundle.
I have been thinking about that a lot lately.
But we like to talk about, the formative years, the early years, and how they may or may not have informed where you are today. But take us back to some of your earlier years, and then we'll go from there.
Honestly, selling the eggs door to door was a big part of that. Now, prior to that, which is also part of those formative years, is I suffered from terrible shyness, like really paralyzing shyness, just hide in the corner. To this day, I always say that's why I became a photographer, because I was a masterful observer. When you're hiding in the corner of life, you're just observing things. So that it was a big stretch for me to go door to door and sell eggs.
Bet.
Yeah. As I say in my book, there were many times I just wanted to vomit off the front porch before I knocked on the door, because it was just really scary to me. But here's what it formed, and why it was so formative for me, is that I realized that, first of all, it wasn't really the money that was the biggest motivator. And by the way, I sold my eggs for $1.25 a dozen, which in 1978 would have been that was a higher price.
Yeah.
Right? Today, that's a bargain.
I know, really.
But I sold them for $1.25 a dozen, only because I could I was buying a dozen of eggs from a local farmer for 25 cents. So I was making $1 a dozen.
Wow.
I struck a deal with a local farmer, right? So, but what stood out to me pretty quick, it wasn't really the money, even though at 14 years old, you kind of want that little extra cash in your pocket. The biggest motivator for me was to come once I got it moving, right? And this is, I think, a key lesson for a lot of business people, that we can try to find our why, we can try to find our purpose, but we often have to get moving in order to figure those things out. I could never have figured out my passion and my why and my purpose at 14 years old, just starting out. But it became more clear to me once I started doing it, because I realized, as scary as it was, the challenge was more exciting than the fear was big, right? There was this, and what I really found out, and for me particularly, it was the challenge of marketing. I loved the mind-bending aspect of marketing. And one of the things I realized early on is, by today's standards, we would refer to it as authenticity. So when I would go collect these eggs from the farmer, In the beginning, I was wiping all the eggs clean of any of the chicken poop, right? So that they were perfectly clean eggs because it seemed like the right thing to do. But then I realized that most of the people I was selling the eggs to were New Yorkers, New York City folks who had moved out to the country, which is where we lived.
Yeah.
And they wanted like authentic farm fresh eggs. And I realized leaving a little bit of the chicken poop on the eggs, just the right amount, made them authentically farm fresh. And Tammy, that's what I fell in love with. I fell in love with the magic of marketing when you got clever.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the magic of chicken poop.
No, but chicken poop's a big part of my formative years, clearly. But I became more, the fear got pushed aside, the more I got excited about just how curious I was about marketing. And that's been very formative throughout my entire career now, because there's a lot of things we do that are really scary. Being a speaker is scary.
Sure.
But when you are more concerned about the impact in the audience than your own fear, you do it anyway.
Yeah. I'm curious how you came to even get in with the farmer to buy the eggs to then decide to go sell them door to door. Like, how did that even come about?
Just by nature, it was a unique environment, to be honest with you. So it was farmland, right? The town is Hopewell Junction, New York. As I often say, you can tell everything about my childhood because it's in the name of where I come from. I came from a place called Hopewell Junction, which people do know now, but ironically, it was in the middle of nowhere.
Uh-huh.
Like it was nowhere. But my father was one of the first employees at IBM's manufacturing plant.
Oh.
IBM was just starting out in the 60s.
Uh-huh.
And because it was farmland, they bought up tremendous lots of land to start the manufacturing of computers. And my father was one of the first 90 employees.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
But IBM was this big upcoming company that everybody wanted to work for. So at 14 years old, putting my marketing head on, I just was kind of like, one thing there was a lot of were eggs by local farms, and people that would find farm fresh eggs. Really, I would say I was selling organic farm fresh eggs before it was a thing.
Right.
And it just was an idea at 14 years old. A way to find some independence in my life.
Yeah. Wow. But at the time, I'll just go to one more thing now, because I know we'll talk more about marketing, but I'm curious, at the time, you probably, as a kid, 14 years old, you probably you noticed, oh, people really like this. It's an impact. You didn't know it was marketing.
Right. But in a way, again, I've always been fascinated by the puzzle of marketing. And these are all the same thoughts I have today, all these years later, is like, when's the right time? So I would be selling these eggs on Saturdays, because when do most people consume eggs? On Sunday mornings. To this day, I have conversations with my coaching clients to pay attention as to when is the best time to send out your email marketing. Right?
Uh-huh.
When is really the right time? What day of the week, what time of the day fits your audience? So honestly, it's the same thing. So I became very clear that it was a Saturday activity because people wanted eggs on Sundays.
So you really were putting yourself in the shoes of your customers.
Correct. And my mom owned a beauty parlor and owned a beauty parlor in town I think she owned the beauty parlor for 40 years. She was a beautician for 60 of her 80 years. She passed at 85, but she retired at 80. So for 60 years, she was a beautician, and 40 of those years had her own salon in town. So again, I would pack up cartons of dozens of eggs and bring them to the beauty parlor on Saturdays, and they would all sell. So, again, I love I was unpacking then what is to this day are still fundamentals of marketing.
Yeah.
Paying attention to your audience and who are you serving, timing, all those things.
Yeah. Wow. So your mom was an entrepreneur, and that was definitely a big part of your life.
Yeah. And yet my father I guess I had a contrast that was so significant, because my mother was an entrepreneur. My father was a miserable corporate guy. Like he worked for IBM. He says he's one of the first 90 employees. And I don't know if he was ever happy a day in his life at that job. And worked there for 23 years until he passed. Yeah. Right. So, but I don't know if he ever had a happy day at work in his life. So I also saw that, which is definitely not a route I wanted to take.
Right. So you had the exposure of both, the big contrast. So what made you decide to stop selling eggs?
Yeah. It probably, just to get to those teenage years, the eggs, and then eventually becoming a professional photographer. Honestly, at some point in my life, in those teen years, kind of around the early years of selling the eggs, I felt unemployable. Right. So it wasn't, I really did. I felt unemployable because I identified as being so shy and introverted. I was like, who would ever hire this geek? I was a nerd, and I was a brainiac. I liked to study. I said I was shy. It didn't seem to me that there was a path for higher education in my family. The affordability was not there. I didn't grow up being in the environment in which I lived. To this day, I said, I don't think my guidance counselor in high school ever mentioned higher education. It was a very, blue collar community, and they just didn't talk about it. So I didn't see a route to a lifestyle that I would really be happy with, other than take the bull by the horns and do my own thing.
Huh. So I just chose self-employment. That was not a conversation at home, or
no. And I'm the youngest of three boys. Neither of my brothers went on my oldest brother completed high school, went into construction. And then my next older brother, the middle brother, he didn't even finish high school. And so kind of went right into the workforce. So it wasn't anything that was emulated to me either. So I can remember distinctly feeling as a teenager, that it's all on my shoulders. Like, I have to find my own way. Higher education wasn't an option. So self-employment to me just seemed like the way to take life, in your own domain and do something with it. I didn't know what it would be, except photography was the only thing that I had a natural talent in, which is why I pursued it as a career. How did you
discover that?
My father kind of dabbled in it as a hobby, and we had a darkroom in the house. So I started in the darkroom. That was more interesting to me. I really liked the chemicals. I liked figuring. So I was taking things that he was photographing, and then I was making the prints.
Neat.
But then eventually you kind of run out of things to print, and I picked up a camera and I started doing my own photography, and loved it, and clearly had a natural talent for it. And that's the ultimate irony of life. And I've seen this in many other people that I've interviewed, that we choose careers, whether it's being a photographer or an author, like you choose these reclusive careers because you identify as being an introvert. And the irony is that when you're good at it, you're suddenly thrown center stage. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened to me as a photographer. Like, for the moment I picked up a camera in high school, I started winning all these national awards, and Kodak sent my photographs on a national tour. And I had to actually go to appearances at galleries in New York City. And then I went off to photography school, and I won pretty much every scholarship and every award that you can get in photography school, as best portfolio, scholarships. I was chosen by the student body to be the speaker at graduation. So, right, that's the irony of it. It's like, well, my talent threw me center stage, which I never saw coming. And then but again, going right back to the eggs, the challenge of it had me more curious than my fear was big.
Yeah.
So I kept overcoming those fear obstacles because of the reward, whether it was the reward of a challenge, the reward of curiosity. Like, there was always a reward that was bigger than the fear. And that has always been what's kept me going.
And I love this. I find I'm curious about this, because this is kind of comes under the umbrella of what I talk about in my book around fear, friend or foe. Is it that sense of fear that paralyzes you, or that sense of fear that really feels more like excitement and intrigue and makes you curious to step over the fear enough to step into something, which it sounds like you would feel. Was there anybody in your young life who encouraged you to step into things, or was it just something within you?
No, I mean, I always joke. I mean, my parents were loving, but I always joke, I think they forgot I lived at home from the age of 14 on, which is kind of why I said, I'm going to make my own money.
Yeah.
I had older brothers, and I think they required a lot more attention than I did. So when they were out of the house, my parents just like wiped their brows and were like, good, we're done parenting, because they were a lot of work. So I wasn't a lot of work. So I think they forgot I even lived at home. So there was no encouragement, good or bad. You know, I can also reflect back and say, you know, my brothers and I are all very different individuals.
Sure.
Didn't even really, I can't say I had role models. I will say that prior even, gosh, I was probably even younger than that, 10, 12 years old. I was really into personal development. I was really into like Wayne Dwyer and his self-help books.
When you were that young?
I was really young, and it was not something my family would have taken kindly to. So I used to either allowance or egg money. I would buy self-help books and I would hide them in my house because I wouldn't want anybody to see me reading them because I would have been picked on. But I always loved personal development. So that became, again, and I've often said self-employment is like self-help on steroids.
Yeah,
I mean, because you encounter everything, you face everything.
Yeah.
As far as your fear, friend or foe, it's such an interesting idea, because clearly I made friends with fear.
You did. Yeah.
But, you know, I don't love the conversations we often hear about the benefits of fear, or almost glamorizing failure. And the reason maybe I'm more sensitive than most, because my family's like, I would have loved to get to where I am without the fear.
Sure, who wouldn't?
Right. It was and believe me, I know plenty of people that have had, reached tremendous success in their life and didn't have the added obstacles of shyness, introversion, fear, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that they were gifted anything, but for many of us, we have all these little extra layers. And for me, I just felt like these were all layers
mm-hmm.
that I had to peck through. Mm-hmm. That was exhausting.
Yeah.
Working your way through fear, shyness, introversion. I would say I wasn't handed a whole lot of natural gifts to figure everything out. Yeah. Hey, I did what I needed to do. I'm not going to whine about it.
Right.
But I don't know that fear is a necessary component. The journey from inside out is different for everybody, right? And there's some people, right?
Sure.
And there's, to go through the layers, to do the inside work to get the outside results.
It could be. I think there's probably a range, depending on the circumstances. But, it sounds like for you had, I like, how cool is that your dad had a dark room in the house, and it spoke to you, so to speak, it drew you in. And, back in the day, you started out with film, right? and you took it forward from there. So when did you start working as a professional photographer?
So, I went off to photography school really with no direction. Again, finished high school, really didn't know what the next step was. And I did the proverbial gap year. So I took a year off after high school because I really didn't know what direction to go in. And again, the only thing I knew that I'd shown some talent as a photographer. I didn't even know what that looked like as a career. I couldn't actually imagine you could turn that into money. I did have a love of architecture, which to this day I still love architecture. I find just looking at architecture is still visually and actually even just viscerally one of the most motivating things for me. I just am such a lover of architecture of all different types, because I think it's incredible what good design can do. Mm-hmm. So when I went off to photography school, I was originally thinking I'd be an architecture photographer, kind of combining the two.
Huh.
And it also felt like the safest avenue for me, because I really didn't like people much and I didn't feel safe around people. So buildings would do me no harm. So that was my choice. But in photographing home interiors, and in particular, part of my portfolio was a series of the interiors of homes. And I started accenting my interior photographs by adding people into them. And I just fell in love with the intimacy of photographing people. I still don't love being around crowds, but I love small gatherings. I love intimate one-to-one conversations. And I absolutely fell in love with the camera as a vehicle for conversation. And that's what led me into portrait photography. And it was a more logical route. I mean, today I refer to as the intersection of meaning and marketability. I mean, the path to a successful business is to find something that's deeply meaningful to you and intersect it with it being marketable. Because it's great to find something that's meaningful for you, but if it's not marketable, you can't build a business on it. And this to me showed itself to be the intersection of meaning and marketability. I personally, viscerally, was emotionally moved by the process. And I could, for the first time, see how a business can be built on it. People will buy photographs. And that's what set me down the road of being a portrait photographer.
So, and as you're talking about this and about building a business, if I was to take the word business and replace it with career, it would apply the same to anybody who's, whether they're self-employed or seeking to build or design a career. But I think the principles that you're talking about really does epitomize, how do you develop yourself and really put yourself in the best position possible to find a pathway to make a living, to have a life that really suits you. And
I would even say, Tammy, I love that you're bringing this up because you're making me aware that I actually often replace the word business with career, even for myself as a self-employed business owner, because when I actually think it's closer to the essence of being self-employed, the word career, because yes, I built a business, but that can so often be construed as the profit is the most important thing, as it often is in business, when really it's a career. And a career to me is more holistic. When I identify as having a career, that is bringing my inside to the table.
Yeah.
Right? When I think of having a career, I do, whether it's a career in a company, whether it's a career path in your chosen field, or it is a career path being self-employed. I think when we identify with having a career, we're being more inclusive of who we are as people and how we exercise our skill set, whether it's through a career path or a business. So I actually often replace, and I definitely would refer to, particularly in hindsight, my 40-year career as a photographer today, because it's more my past than my present.
Yeah.
So to me, it feels more like a career than it did a business.
Yeah, because it really was. I love that holistic piece that you talk about, and it really it ties in with the whole notion of I think in this day and age, especially more now than ever, regardless of who your employer is, whether you're self-employed or you're employed by someone else, I think there still is got to be this element of really embracing and taking ownership of what you're doing. And making those choices. Now, when you're self-employed, you are bottom line responsible, which is different than being employed by somebody.
I love that you're tying ownership in with career, because that's 100% right to the energy of it. And as the author of a book called Lingo, I love the energy of words. And I always say, like, I almost would like to do a second edition of Lingo to reflect the inside experience and the energy of words.
Yeah.
And let's say if you just compare career versus job, right? If you have a job, it's outside of yourself and you're not taking ownership of it. You're kind of handing over the responsibility to someone else.
Right.
When you think of it as, my career,
right,
there is absolutely energetically a very different energy to energy of responsibility, because one needs to take responsibility for their career path, because nobody's going to hand it to you. Nobody can lay out that path for you because it's your path, right? I love that. I think ownership, career and ownership are the beautiful tie-in. But I think the difference between, that's why I often refer to my business as my career, because business can feel outside of myself, and it can feel like it's led by money.
Yeah, it's an entity, It's
right.
an entity.
Where career has a personal accountability to it. That I think is more reflective of my actual essence of it.
Right, because you had and still have a career as a photographer, and that has evolved. You are an author, you are a business person, you are a consultant, a coach, a speaker. Those are all elements of who you are and who you are in your career, right? So take us forward a little bit. You went to photography school. That sounds like that was also kind of a conscious choice on your part. My guess is you didn't have to do that. You could have built your photography business without that.
Perhaps, although, I mean, I would almost equate it to coaching, right? In that it's a choice to go on your own,
Yeah.
or there's a choice to get support,
right?
And while I had talent as a photographer, there was, as a youth, there was certainly a lot for me to learn.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether, and I do think this is accelerated when you become of a certain age, but I felt this way at 20. It's like, I just didn't see any reason to waste my time reinventing the wheel. Like, why should I spend 5 years figuring out the makeup of a camera and f-stops and shutter speed and aperture? And I mean, when I can go to school and have a better understanding of that. Like, that's the point of it, right? And I will say, I specifically chose a photography school, which again says a lot about my personality. It was a 10-month program. I actually was accepted into the Rochester Institute of Technology, but that was a 4-year program. I wasn't willing to commit 4 years to learn what I didn't think it was necessary to learn at that depth. And I'm glad I did, because I ended up going down a completely different career path. I don't know how I would have made any money as an architectural photographer. I just don't think there's enough demand compared to a family photography.
Yeah. Wow. So, so 10 months in photography school. And was that also up in the Rochester area? I know that was Kodak.
That was Kodak's domain.
Headquarters.
No, it was actually, and here's another great business lesson. Love this. So no, it was actually in a small town called Greenfield, Massachusetts. You might know it.
Sure.
Okay. So it was called the Hallmark Institute of Photography. It has nothing to do with Hallmark cards. There was a lawsuit at some point, which Hallmark cards did not win, because Hallmark is a word.
Right.
But here's the cool part. So Hallmark Institute of Photography was started by the founder of Hallmark Color Lab. Hallmark Color Lab was a photo lab for photographers. The problem was they had too many customers that were always going out of business.
Oh my
because
goodness.
It's an industry where people are talented, but there's no business training on how to make money as a photographer. So he decided to start a school to teach people how to teach photographers how to be in business. So our curriculum, which is what made sense to me, is it was 40% business, 60% photography. We actually had public speaking classes. We operated an actual operating photography studio within the school.
Nice.
So the students were actually running a business, and all our courses, all our assignments, photographic assignments, were given a dollar value, not a grade. So our accounting that we were learning tied into the accounting of our assignments.
Nice.
So it was a business school. It no longer exists, unfortunately. The school, it existed for many decades and hit some hard times, and unfortunately a different family member than the founder got involved, and there was some corruption and et cetera. So the school was closed. But it's for that very same reason that that I started the Self-Employed Business Institute. It was actually the same awareness that after my book came out, The Self-Employed Life, I did a hard look at my coaching clients. At that point, a few years ago, I'd been coaching at that point for 15 years. And I realized everybody I've coached over 15 years was really good at something. The people I were attracting were people that were trying to put something out in the world that was unconventional.
Right.
So they were really good, whether it's coaching, consulting, being a photographer, bakers, so many different industries. They were all really good at something, but they were in industries where there was no training on how to make money at it. And that's why I founded the Self-Employed Business Institute from that perspective. I'm like, well, there needs to be business training for people that are doing unconventional things in the world, and in industries that don't teach it.
And there's a lot of that.
A lot of it, and more, and it's growing. I mean, that's an audience we're seeing a world that's more based on talent and skill sets and unique industries, even trade schools. I mean, that's one of my goals for the Business Institute is to reach out to trade schools, because even plumbers, electricians, all these vocational schools are putting out tradespeople, but not teaching them how to make money at it.
Right.
And the same thing with coaches. I've had, in my career path, I've had very extensive training as a coach. I've received over 1,000 hours of training as a coach. Not once did anybody ever teach me how to make money as a coach.
And before we get to where you are today, let's let the audience know how, you built, an extremely successful photography business, very robust, lots of repeat business, very well-heeled clients, and amazing relationships with your clients. What made you decide to then start to cut back on that and step into coaching?
On some days, I still ask myself. On those days, I still wonder, what was I? Because I know that was the question. Everybody, I was like, what were you thinking? I made the mistake. Now, my partner of 4 years has only known me for what I do today. He knows the stories of being a photographer. He knows I do a few shoots a year, but I made the mistake in 2020, in the middle of the pandemic. I had some photo shoots my clients really wanted me to do. So we drove from Florida to New York and we quarantined for 2 weeks. And then I did a few photo shoots, and he came along in that adventure and had the opportunity to hang out at some of my clients', mansions and gorgeous lifestyle. And it was a mistake, because he's like, what were you thinking? He just couldn't fathom why. And not only just the settings, but the people. He was like, these are like the nicest people. They love you.
Yeah.
He says, these kids have known you their whole lives and they adore you. And you've got an incredible, he's like, why? And I have just one answer for it. And the answer is, I felt complete. I never got bored. I never disliked it.
Yeah.
I felt complete. I just got to a point after, it's now been 40 years. So, I was 25, 30 years in as being a photographer, and I just felt complete. And it was,
I like that. I love the way you say that.
Yeah. And there was maybe some business growth opportunities, but I didn't feel a lot of personal growth opportunities. So I made a decision. I just was looking for more. And that's when I started coach training and looking at other options. I knew I built a very unusual business, or as I like to say now, for all those years, decades, I sold something nobody needed to the hardest market in the world to break into. Right. I realized that I fundamentally had a way of doing business that other people didn't. And I wanted to share that. And I wanted to really help the unconventional people in the world, the unconventional business owners, the people doing and I put coaching and consulting in the unconventional bucket, because it requires an unconventional way of thinking to obtain clients and an unconventional way of thinking to build a coaching business. So it doesn't mean that you're a weirdo when I say unconventional. It's just that it's not mainstream business. Or as I like to say, we're all in businesses where the line business is business, don't take it personal, doesn't apply.
Right.
Right.
No,
because it's all personal.
I obviously know what you're saying.
Yeah. So it's not weird. It's just unconventional. So I started pulling back, doing less and less photography. And initially I started doing some speaking in the photo industry, for which I was already known in. So that was an easy entree. And then that started leading to people asking me to coach them, which is why I went to coach training. I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it with some fundamentals that I can do with integrity. So I went to coach training and just never stopped receiving coach training, leadership training, et cetera. And at some point I felt a little locked into the photo industry. So I wrote my first book, Lingo, kind of as my coming out card of my thoughts are bigger than photography. And I wanted to be in the world in a bigger way. So I wrote that book specifically kind of as my entree into entrepreneurship instead of just the business of photography.
It's interesting that you wrote a book to do that. What made you decide to write a book as opposed to maybe go out on the speaker circuit and spread your message that way? I know you were also speaking, But
honestly, at that point, I didn't speak. My first speaking gig outside the photo industry was 2018, the year my book Lingo came out. Prior to then, I had 9 years of speaking experience prior to that, but it was all within the photo industry. So to me, it was about, and I think the term thought leadership gets a bad rap. And I understand it. I mean, when one calls himself a thought leader, it sounds fraught of ego. But I also think that is what it is. If you have unique thoughts and you want to lead the world or a group of people in a direction with your thoughts, you're a thought leader. And I don't think there should be shame in that. So, or, you could say you're an expert on a topic, however is easier for somebody. But I felt like I really had unique thoughts about business. And when I spoke in the photo industry, I'm not kidding. I would speak at photo events and catering managers, people in the kitchen, they would be coming up to me after my speaking gig and say, that everything you're talking about isn't just about photography. I'm like, I know that. Right. So I realized that my audience was bigger. And to me, it just felt like I had to write the book in order to gain the credibility as a thought leader on my business thoughts so that I could then get the speaking gigs and shift my consulting, my coaching also away from just coaching photographers to coaching. And the challenge, honestly, Tammy, was there was a point where I had to really unidentify as being a photographer because the world had put me into such a box.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And right.
It was hard to get out of.
I mean, decades of, right. Yeah. Right.
So at some point I had to stop coaching photographers. Now I can again because the balance is there. But for a while, I actually had to stop coaching photographers in order to stop the vacuum.
Yeah. So Lingo came out and you cut back on sort of circulating in the photography world, although you've always maintained a few photography clients. And then you wrote The Self-Employed Life. Now that came out 2 years ago? No, a year and a half ago.
It was May of 2021. So it's coming on. Yeah, it's coming on 2 years.
Yeah, it'll be 2 years in May.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was, that was a shift actually, because I was actually writing another book. I had another topic in mind. I was already beginning the outline and heading down that road of writing another book. And the book I was writing, which was advised to me, if you will, by a couple of people that I really respect, who felt like this would strategically be the right move for me career-wise. And I agreed. I looked at it. I'm like, I could see how this could bust open and be a big book because it was very specific, and sometimes specific on a specific topic is more in demand, and it was going to be a shorter, more pithy book. I could see the marketability of it. As I said earlier, the intersection between meaning and marketability. This is a case where it was heavy on the marketability side, but it just wasn't having a whole lot of meaning for me. And I just set it aside. And I actually gave a keynote, which was a bit of a stretch for me. The keynote was called Life Isn't Everything Bagel. So you can tell by the name, it was not a conventional business talk. It was the most motivational infused business talk I had ever given. Yeah. That it wasn't just teaching the strategies. It was believing that life isn't everything bagel, and you need to get everything, let's stop choosing between sesame seed, poppy seed, garlic, just choose everything.
Yeah.
Right. And how do we have the business strategies that open up those doors? So
love it.
I came off the stage and I contacted my editor and said, I'm writing the wrong book. Here's the book that means something to me. And I didn't know it was going to be called The Self-Employed Life. It started out just being, I want to give everything I had learned in 40 years about life, about business, about how business, the whole point of business should be that we live the lives that we dream of, whether it's your career path in a company or it's your own self-employed. The bottom line is it should be providing you with the life of your dreams. And I wanted to write that book. And then as I started writing it, I realized that I was really writing for self-employed business owners.
Yeah.
To really wake them up to being proud of being a self-employed, identifying as being self-employed, and providing the tools they needed to get the business out of the way, get the business operating, getting the business do what you want it to do, so that you can live the life of your dreams.
And it does that. I mean, I picked up the book probably the week it came out and started reading it. And I just thought, wow, I don't normally pick up a book immediately and start reading it and think, this is amazing. I'm too cynical for that usually.
Thank you.
But it was that great. And then you started the Self-Employed Business Institute.
Mm-hmm.
Was that in your mind when you wrote
Not at
this
all.
book?
Nope.
So
not
that's
at all.
really interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting because the book, of course, is like, it's like the Bible for the Self-Employed Business Institute, even though you've done a lot with the Business Institute too. And I know that because I was your student.
Yeah.
But the book itself I can't recommend it highly enough to people. And I think there's a lot in here, even for people who aren't necessarily even heading in the direction of self-employment. I think of self-employment as anybody who needs to be in charge of their career.
Yeah.
And
100%. I actually was asked on a podcast once, and it was actually the beginning of even thinking about the Self-Employed Business Institute, but I was a guest on a podcast and they asked me what seemed to me to be the oddest question for somebody whose expertise is self-employment. He asked, what did I think the future of employment looked like? And I said, honestly, I think the future of employment looks a lot like self-employment.
Absolutely.
I said, because as someone who's always been self-employed, I'd look at what do our employees asking for? They're asking for autonomy. They're asking for remote work. They're asking for flexibility. They're asking for a job that doesn't force that they fit their life into the job, but that the job fits into their life. They're asking for all the same things that the reason people become self-employed. So I actually have been encouraged. I haven't jumped on the opportunity yet because I am so focused on the Self-Employed Business Institute, but I've been encouraged to bring that. And I've started developing the talk around the self-employed mindset and actually bringing that to companies as a recruiting and HR talk to help employees really understand because honestly, the best employees for them are the people who are self-employed mindset.
Absolutely.
I mean, who could be a better employee? Right. Who could be a better employee than somebody who thinks of the company they work for as if it was their own?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of people that say self-employment, owning your own business isn't for everybody.
No, it's a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of work.
I mean, in fact, it's probably even harder work in some ways.
But there are people that have that. My son is one of them. My son technically works for a lobbyist group, technically, but he operates so independently. His employers never have to wonder if he's working hard enough.
Right.
They never have to question how he's spending his time.
Right.
Because they've given him autonomy and accountability and responsibility that he is doing his best, which is an amazing job. This to me, this is who companies need to be hiring, people that have a self-employed mindset. So I agree with you. I think there's a lot of context in the book, but what happened with the Business Institute was after the book was out, a book can do what a book can do, right? But I felt, just like we've discussing with career, I felt a very heavy burden of responsibility after the book was out for the audience that I wrote the book for. And I started feeling like a book wasn't enough. I wrote the best book I could, but I didn't feel that I had done enough to actually help self-employed businesses. Because I have big dreams. I mean, one of my dreams is someday I would really like, because I think of myself now as more of an advocate for self-employed business owners. And one way in which I'd like to be an advocate is I would like to work with the banking industry to convince them that, and I want to open up the opportunity for funding for small businesses and particularly self-employed. And one way to do that is to increase the success rate. The way to increase the success rate is for banks to require that self-employed business owners get coaching. So loan coaching becomes a criteria for loans so that we can increase the success rate of small businesses and self-employed businesses, which will make the banks open up the funding. Okay.
Right.
It's a big dream. So I realized after the book was out, I didn't feel like I was doing enough. And that's why I started the Business Institute. I was like, I have to take the book to the next level and not just introduce concepts, but actually teach people how to do the things that are necessary to be successful and increase the success rate of, all self-employed businesses, but certainly the people I care about.
So tell us a little bit about, give us a snapshot, use photography language. Give us a
well
snapshot
done, huh?
of the Self-Employed Business Institute.
So it's a 5-month curriculum. It's a 5-month cohort, and we have smallish cohorts, so everybody gets personal attention. The most significant part of it to me is that it's a blend of group training and one-to-one coaching, because I don't want to just train people on what to do. I also want to make sure I'm guiding the individual and supporting the individual through coaching. So it's a necessary blend to have the group coaching and the one-to-one coaching support. What is continuing to be the most interesting part about the whole process for me, and will continue to grow, is what I refer to as alumni benefits. And really, as we've said so many times, that the learning is in the doing. And what I'm learning by having several cohorts now, what I'm really learning about the Business Institute is that I want to guarantee people's success. I don't want it to be, you take this information and do with it as you choose, right? There's too much of that. There's too much self-direction. And self-direction for my audience is ridiculous, because self-direction for self-employed people are incredibly self-directed. They're also exhausted. They're also overwhelmed.
Right.
So I don't want to add more self-direction to their lives. So we're really stepping into, what does it mean to guarantee success? And what that means to me is support way beyond the curriculum. So anybody that completes the 5-month curriculum can come back to all the twice-a-month training calls, the twice-a-month open coaching calls, the community that we've built on Mighty Networks, the guest speakers, the workshops. It's actually a forever membership.
Yeah.
Once you've completed the program, you can come back to all those things. We do a 6-month check-in after people complete the program. 6 months later, we have a check-in. We've even taken that to the next level. It was originally just a group check-in. Now it's a group check-in and a 30-minute one-to-one coaching call for each student within a month's time. So that I'm just really stepping into the highest level of success guarantee. And what guarantees people's success is continual support, not the one-time learning, but the continual support. So I think it's a really, it just continues to be such a unique program. And what we're delivering is, I refer to as the self-employed ecosystem. It's the nuts and bolts. It's the marketing. It's the brand messaging. It's the productivity. It's the strategies of being a guest on a podcast. Like it's everything from specific to broad, but I think everything that you need to succeed when you're self-employed.
And, layered above, in the middle, and below it, throughout it, is personal development too. That's always part of the equation. I say this from my own experience, having gone through it and knowing that I always feel welcome and invited into the community. It's an amazing community of people. And I would say that you are tremendously generous with your experience, your knowledge, and the insights that you offer people are incredible. I mean, that comes from who you are, Jeffrey. It's not just the curriculum. It's there's a special sauce that is threaded throughout the Institute and the work that you're doing with people. And it's I can't say enough good things about it. And you didn't even pay me to say that. So
no, I did not.
But I
really appreciate that feedback. And I'll just add to it that, I always come back to the fact that I have to recognize I had a really unique experience in business. Being a photographer for very affluent families, again, selling something nobody needed, it was such a unique perspective. It required a level of detail and a level of relationship that we all talk about today, but it takes a level of relationship building that is just at a whole other level. It takes a level of trust that has to be built at a whole other level. It takes the essence of customer loyalty and keeping people. I realized in hindsight, it was just that's why I know what I know. That's why there's like this vast repertoire in my brain of things I can help people with, because I had a very unique experience for so many decades in a profession that was just so odd.
Yeah.
It was odd, but fantastic.
Yeah. And you're sharing it with other people so generously, and it's such great value. I want to touch very briefly on the fact that you are actually starting to write another book.
I am indeed.
You want to touch on that, and then
Yeah.
we probably need to wrap this up. But
Absolutely.
But yeah, so you're writing about self-doubt now, is that right?
It is. I am. And so again, I love how these things come together. One thing that's always stood, because I know I want to be a serial author. Definitely. The plan is 7 books, like as far as out as I can see, right? So and for me, it's every 3 years. My good friend Mike Michalowicz puts out a book every 18 months, which is just astonishing to me. But for me, it's every 3 years. So the next book will be out. This book will be out in September of 2024. And I start with what does the people I'm serving, what do they need next? Okay. And so my frame of mind started with that. What do they need next? And even though this will be far less of a business book, I've given all I can for the moment on business skills.
Mm-hmm.
What's in the way often now is self-doubt. What's in the way now is confidence. What's in the way now is stepping into, setting aside the humbleness and stepping into the bigness of who they are. So it started for me with really asking the question. I'll share this. One of the best bits of advice I've ever heard in my life, and I don't know who it came from or what to credit it to, but somebody said to me once, for every problem you solve, you introduce a new problem. Mm. And it's been one of the greatest marketing bits of advice I ever heard, because when I really got the essence of that, I understood that for every problem you solve, you introduce a new problem. So now you can decide, do you want to introduce something that solves the new problem and that becomes another avenue of your business, or do you not? Or what? I'm just not somebody who, I don't want to just leave people in a lurch. So to me, I felt like I solved a lot of problems with business strategies, and I wanted to look at what problem I introduced. And the problem I introduced is now I'm calling people to the mat to be the biggest and boldest version of themselves. And self-doubt is therefore going to introduce itself. And the book is specifically kind of self-doubt for high achievers. So that became the beginning thoughts. And then the aforementioned friend, Mike Michalowicz, I had a conversation with him, and he just blew my mind when he asked me a really challenging question, which I would suggest a lot of people ask themselves, which is when it comes to ideation, what's something almost everybody experiences and thinks they're the only one? And that's the intersection of meaning and marketability. That was his way of determining something that would be highly marketable. Mm-hmm. And when he asked the question, I said self-doubt. Like, I hear it all day long. I mean, almost everybody encounters self-doubt. We know other people do too, but we manage it. We try to manage it on our own. We stay in our quiet little corners full of our self-doubt, and we don't share it enough, and we don't develop tools to manage it. So that solidified the idea that I wanted to write a book about self-doubt, which, yes, will be for self-employed business owners, but also for a much, much broader audience.
Absolutely.
Because who doesn't encounter self-doubt?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So it's already been fascinating. The research, it's going to be a much more researched and interview-based book than my 2 previous books, which is something I took away from your book that I loved so much, how interview heavy it was. That was really inspiring for me.
Yeah.
So this book will be much more like that.
Yeah, it's always good to tell stories that help other people feel grounded. It actually helps people to feel like, oh, I'm not the only one.
Right.
Yeah.
I felt like my 2 previous books, I had answers. This book, I'm going into with no answers. I don't have any answers at how to manage self-doubt. This is going to be an exploration that I just want to bring people along on the exploration of self-doubt.
That's exciting.
And see where we land. I don't know yet.
I love it. So, Jeffrey, clearly you and I could go on and on here.
And I would.
and we will. When the next book comes out, we'll have to have another conversation. So, what is the best way for people to find you and learn even more about your coaching, your speaking, the Self-Employed Business Institute, all these things? Where can they find you? We'll have, of course, many more links in the show notes too. The
best place to start is jeffreyshaw.com.
Okay.
Honestly, start there, and you can find your way to the Business Institute. There, as part of the Business Institute, as well as the work I do, I review a lot of websites to find the disconnect between people's what they think they're saying and how it's really coming across on the website. So I offer a complimentary view of your website. So there's a button right there to grab that, which I highly recommend. You get a chance to, as somebody said to me the other day, they took they filled out the application for a website review, and they said this was as therapeutic as it was helpful. Like it was, because I asked questions in the application that they get you thinking about your customers.
Oh, nice.
So it's the foundation for all that is right at my website, jeffreyshaw.com.
Extraordinary. And one final question, and that is, a lot of people listening are themselves thinking about what's next for them, and you yourself have made many decisions along the way and made some transitions professionally. So what would be a key piece of advice that you would give to somebody who's trying to navigate and decide what their next move is going to be?
I would say, similar to a practice that I teach our students, is to have a theme for the year. And whether it's your theme for the year or at any point, right? Because we tend to think of these words for the year or themes for the year in the early part of the year. But I think really what it comes down to, but I do like the difference, and I like to point out the difference between a theme and a word.
Yeah.
Because what if you think about your theme, it's a combination of what you want, but also what is wanted for you at the same time. It requires a degree of listening that I instead of just picking a word because it inspires you. What I like about having a theme is it requires very keen listening to what it feels like is the right time in your life for you. And I think if more people in choosing their career path or career transitions or life transitions, I think we need to spend more time really paying attention to what is wanted for you, whether you want to call it your God, your universe, whatever you want to call it. All I know is at this point in my life, I can look back and realize how many times, and this is particularly true of goal-oriented people, success-minded people. If you reflect back at how many times you wanted something really bad and you were hitting your head against the wall and it just wasn't happening. And then at some point you wake up to it, maybe it finally came to be for you, or maybe it didn't. But I can almost guarantee you at some point you're going to look back and say, it's a really good thing that didn't happen at that time. And that's, I realize there's a tremendous amount of time and energy wasted in pushing so hard for what we want, but we're not paying attention to whether the timing in the universe in your life is right for it to be wanted for you.
Yeah.
So I don't care what time of the year it is or what transition period you're at. That's what I would highly recommend people do, which I think I've gotten really attuned to. I mean, as you know, I just moved a couple months ago from that listening. From just really listening to not just what I wanted, but what I felt was really wanted for me. Right. So that's what I would recommend for anybody at any precipice of considering a change or a transition is don't just decide from the brain what you want.
Right.
Listen closely with your heart as to what is wanted for you as well.
Well, that sounds very inside out like to me,
I'd
Jeffrey.
say so. It all comes down to inside.
Well, listen, I can't thank you enough for being here today, but also for all the support that you've given to me and to all these amazing self-employed people who are out there putting some really great work into the world, and the way that you've supported them. It's really adding some really positive energy out there that I've witnessed it and I've experienced it, and I just want to thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for saying so. It's my pleasure. And I don't say that in a trite way. Like it really is. It's an honor. It's an honor. Work is an honor.
I know. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Jeffrey Shaw. It was so interesting to speak with him and learn about his early life, his background, and professional transitions. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them in the show notes on my website at tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just look for episode 215. Are you anticipating your next professional move? Check out my award-winning book, Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles and design a career that fulfills you. It's available in paperback and ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, independent bookstores, or through your local library. If you were inspired by this episode with Jeffrey, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. If you're enjoying the podcast, I'd be ever so grateful to read your written review on Apple Podcasts. All you have to do is go to my website, tammygulerloeb.com/podcast, and click on the Apple Podcasts button and follow the instructions provided there. You can also help out by buying me a cup of coffee. Go to buymeacupofcoffee.com/TammyGL. Since this podcast is self-funded, I would so much appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.